Sun City book lovers, welcome to Meet the Author. This show is made possible by Sun City Hilton Head Lifestyle Services, giving us a chance to learn more about the books we want to read and the people who create them.
Welcome to Meet the Author. We book lovers read for various reasons: escape, entertainment, education, and sometimes we need to read something that will raise our awareness of social issues. Tonight's featured book meets that criteria. Sun City resident and author Bob Durst's first-hand accounts with addiction. In his book, Funny, I Don't Remember Any Good Dope Days. Tonight we will hear the stories of the people that he's encountered and the lessons he's learned. What a great time. Let's start with our conversation. Okay, Bob, I think we should start by taking those readers into the story that you've created in reality of Funny, I Don't Remember Any Good Dope Days.
Georgia, most people when they see the title think it's a personal chronicle, that somehow I had a voyage through addiction or I knew someone who did. That's not the case. It's a true story. Everything in the book is true about my experiences with young women in a county jail in southeast Florida who were profound heroin addicts.
Mm-hmm. Now, at the conclusion of chapter 1,
yes,
we've not gotten any further. You're leaving your retirement party, great career in law, and you tell your wife, let's see where life takes us. How did that go, Bob?
I thought life was going to take us on probably an annual or semi-annual cruise, probably 4 or 5 days of golf a week, maybe a little tennis thrown in. Well, we got to Florida, and we were motivated, called to begin working with homeless men and women. And that's how it began. We began taking them home-cooked meals in the woods. That grew. I began visiting with them in the jails. Through that, I began connecting with the young ladies that were homeless, that were in the jails, and that's the beginning, and the rest of the story is in the book.
As you, escalated from charity work to become a titled prison chaplain.
Correct.
Okay, that is correct. What were those initial challenges working within an incarcerated population?
Well, the first challenge was I have no experience with addiction, none whatsoever, praise God. I'm not an addiction counselor, and to make matters worse, I never raised a daughter. I had 2 sons, so I didn't know how to relate to these ladies. I didn't know what message to take them. The first challenge was getting into the jail, and there's very strict regulations about who can meet one-on-one with inmates. Fortunately, the sheriff, who was in charge of the jails, county jails in Florida, was sympathetic to what we were doing, and he dubbed me a chaplain. So I became anointed the chaplain with no experience and no knowledge. That's how he referred to me.
Well, you definitely needed the spirit on your side at that point. Now, what the reader is going to find in this book is that, I might have expected some statistics, some science behind this, or the organizations working, but you really got us into the grim reality of what these addicts were going through. So in your writing process, how did you know to give us the dialogue, their setting, to make those stories so poignant? I mean, you identify with every one of those addicts.
The primary purpose for writing the book was to give them a voice. They're voiceless people, faceless people. I wanted them to be heard. I belong to a little writing group here in Sun City with 6 or 8 colleagues that are writers, and they worked me over hard. Each week I would come and I'd read a chapter, and it would be in my legal style of writing, which is no adjectives, nouns and verbs, get to the facts.
And I bet some of that salty language wasn't in that legal language either.
No. And then I did submit the book to a couple of Christian publishing companies, Covenant and a couple of others, and they loved it. But they said, you have to clean up the language. And I said, I can't. I can't tell the story of a young lady going out to a truck stop and selling her body to get dope. What am I going to say? She took a box of Girl Scout cookies out and sold them to the truckers?
Well, like I said, grim
It had to be
reality.
what it was.
It is grim reality, but that's their story.
That's
and you
their
told
life.
it so beautifully.
Thank you.
Now, realistically, you had successes and you had failures. Can you share at least one of those experiences that really sticks with you?
It's hard to pick one. I could talk about Dale, I could talk about Danielle, I could talk about Ashley, but I think the one that haunts me the most is Peter. Peter was a young man that I was working with. I believe that he had finally been motivated to a sober life. He asked me to call his father, who lived up in Ohio, and see if he could come home. I did, and the father told me that no, Peter could not come home. They'd already mortgaged the farm to support his rehabs. The last time he was home, he had given drugs to some of his younger cousins and siblings. He had stolen from the family, all typical behavior of addicts, unfortunately. So no, he couldn't come home. I went and relayed that message to Peter. Several days later, the father called me back and said, we've had a family meeting and we've changed our minds. Peter can come home. With great joy, I went over to the jail to find Peter. He wasn't there. He'd been released. So I put the word out on the street amongst the homeless people and the police officers, find Peter for me, find Peter. A couple days later, one of the police officers came and said, we found Peter. I said, oh, great. All I got to do is get him no, he doesn't need a bus ticket. He was hit by a train down in Hobe Sound last night. Did he commit suicide? Was he inattentive? Was he under the influence? I don't know. But then I had to call the father, and the father's scream in answer to that phone call still resonates in my ears. Mm-hmm. That poor man, two men died that day, Peter and his father.
Oh, and I know the book shares those stories, and when you mention their names, the Dales, the Ashleys, you really have made those come alive to my mind as I've read the book, so I hope everybody will pick that book up to have that experience. Now, let's go to the idea of in a perfect world. What could break this cycle of addiction and its often fatal results?
You're going to get me on a soapbox, Georgia. Addiction is a bigger scourge on society than COVID ever was. More people are dying from addiction than ever died from COVID. But yet, we don't hear about it. It's not your grandmother, it's not your spouse, it's not, to use a term from Billy Joel, it's not a white bread world. These are kids on the streets, and when they die, and they don't get the attention that we got during COVID. So I think in a perfect world, we just have to splash cold water on our face and say, we have a health scourge here that is literally wiping out a generation of young people, that's robbing us of minds and creativity and destroying families at the rate of 150,000 people a year. What do? We seal the borders. We stop the trafficking of drugs. We impose stiffer sentences on people that sell drugs, that kill children. We build better treatment facilities. We mobilized and did what we had to do during COVID. We can do it here. The message just hasn't gotten out.
Well, I think it's that reality that, it's someone else, like the NIMBY. Not in my backyard. I don't have this. I don't want to solve the problem. I don't have the problem in my backyard.
Oh, I know what those druggies are. And people used to say to me before I wrote the book, when I would just tell them what I was doing, well, why don't they just stop taking drugs? Their life would be fine if they stopped taking drugs. Oh. To you and I, that's like saying, why don't you stop drinking water or breathing air?
Yeah.
It's not that simple.
Thanks to your profound writing, you've moved so, I certainly am moved by this book. You're going to, motivate so many people hearing you this evening at your presentation. What do you hope we all get back in our cars and think? Or if we've taken that book home, we shut that last chapter, what do you want us to take away?
I want you to take away an image of these people, these precious souls, these wonderful people, the survivors and the non-survivors. And I want every person who hears about this book to do on some level what I did and say, I can help fix this. I can be a part of the solution. If it's only educating people, if it's only telling people about the book, telling people about what's going on. This is America.
Yeah.
We've won world wars. We've conquered civil wars. We've conquered depressions. We beat COVID. We can beat drugs.
We're leading the country in a wrong way this time.
Yes,
but
ma'am.
Let's conclude with what you concluded the book with, and that's the quote by Jimmy Carter. And if I get this right, he said, "You can do what you have to do, but sometimes you can do even better
Yes.
than you think you can."
Yes.
Thank you, because you've not done better. You've done your best.
Yes.
Thank you so
I
much.
start the book with a quote from Maya Angelou, and I end it with Jimmy Carter, and they're both very much alike. Maya said, "Do the best you can until you learn to do better, then do better."
Well, you've done your best, and I
Thank
am
you,
so
Georgia.
grateful to you
Thank
for
you.
this book.
I'm grateful to you. Thank you. Thank you.
One funny little anecdote was the sheriff who allowed me to begin this and got me into the jail, and I'll tell you that story as we go along, came to me one time and he said, "Bob, I'm going to do you a big favor." I said, "What's that, Sheriff?" He said, "I'm going to issue a carry permit for you. I want you to carry a firearm when you go into the woods." I said, is that a direction or an offer to help? Because if it's a direction, you just lost a volunteer. I am not going into the woods with a firearm. Number one, I'm not going to shoot anybody in the woods, and number two, I don't want to be shot in the woods. So if I can't build trust and I can't put my arm around some of the men and women and speak to them like a brother, I don't need a firearm to help me. From that point, one evening, several of the men came to me and said, Jerry, who was one of our stalwarts, one of the men that really helped us get it all started, had been arrested. He'd been arrested for distributing drugs. I didn't know Jerry had a drug problem. Surprise, surprise, he did. And he sold drugs to support it. Not a surprise either. But they told me that Jerry put on a strong front, but he was really subject to panic attacks and anxiety, and he just was not going to fare well in the jail. Could I go over and visit him? I practiced law for 50 years. I never represented a criminal defendant, and I was never in a jail. So this was a brand new experience for me. I had no idea how to visit someone in a jail. First of all, you have to be invited. The inmate has to put you on their visitors list. Didn't know that. Came back to the guys and I said, not going to be so easy for me to get in there because Jerry's got to put me on the list. We'll take care of that. In about an hour, the message went from the woods into the jail, back out from the jail to the woods. He's got you on the list. Go see him. I don't know how that grapevine works. I just know it worked. So I go in to see Jerry. That begins the process. If you've ever visited someone in a jail, I guess if I were being my normal sarcastic self, I would say save your time, because what you're going to get is a telephone receiver and a little TV screen about that big with about 50 people sitting around screaming at the top of their lungs in every language you can imagine, in every form of street talk that you can imagine, and babies crawling between your feet, and you're trying to have a conversation. Well, my conversation with Jerry was an orange square about this big because the camera was focused on his chest, not on his face, and I don't know that we could understand a word. I stopped at the desk on the way out and I said, how can I get in to see these people one-on-one? I want to sit eyeball to eyeball. I want to hold their hand. I want to help them while they're here. And I can't do that over this silly telephone. Well, you're a lawyer. Used to be, but I don't have a license and I'm not here to represent anyone. Are you a clergy? No. Well, then you can't get in. Okay? So I'm leaving. A gentleman with a shirt and tie and a jacket comes out. He said, I heard your conversation. I'm the program director here at the jail. What is it you want to do? So I explained to him why I wanted to visit the men. He said, we have about 18 different programs here in the jail, ranging from AA to church services to GEDs to everything you can imagine. We don't have anything that addresses the homeless population. If you want to do it, I'm going to see if I can get you in. Long story short, I worked my way up to the ladder until one day I'm sitting in the sheriff's office, and every person I talked to, every step of the way, I had to repeat the story, and I began to think, these guys are all cops, aren't they? They're smart, aren't they, Charlie? If 6 of them are going to ask you questions, they all ask you the same question, and they want to see if your answer is the same. Well, by the time I got to the end of the story, it was the same. It wasn't going to vary. The sheriff looked at me and he said, do you have any training as a counselor? I said, none whatsoever. The only way I can get you in the jail is to call you a chaplain. Do you have any objection to that? And I said, not in the least. My world revolves around my spiritualism. Call me a chaplain. He said, you are now Mr. Chaplain, know nothing, no experience. So I go in. After a couple of months, one of the gentlemen said to me, would you go over and visit my girlfriend? We were picked up last night. She was as high as a kite. She had just shot up before we got picked up. She's going to be crashing and crashing hard. Now let me just digress a minute. When you go into jail and you're crashing, they take everything out of your cell. So you have a metal slab, a little toilet, and if you're lucky, a little sink, and they may give you a Tylenol. That's how you crash in most jails. When you're coming down from heroin, which we'll talk about in a little while, that's a life or death situation. It's not a hangover. It's not somebody that had 2 or 3 too many martinis and wakes up in the morning with a hangover. It's life or death. And if you go in to withdrawal from heroin, you probably have about a 50-50 chance of dying or surviving. So this gentleman was very concerned. I said, I don't think I can do it. I can only see men. So I'm walking down the hallway and I thought, well, might as well call the boss. Sheriff, is this the do-nothing chaplain? Or the know-nothing chaplain? I said, yes, sir, it is. I said, I have a request. Can I go into the women's cell block to visit a lady that I've been asked to see? Absolutely not. Can't do that. I said, I don't want to argue with you, Sheriff. You've done me an enormous favor to get me in here. But I'm sitting in a 10 by 10 concrete block room with 4 cameras on the ceiling and a speaker on the wall. What do you think's going to happen when I have a woman in the room with me? Good point. Go see her. That started it. That spread like wildfire. The first couple of ladies that I met with, I connected with, and I could have conversations with them that were helpful to them and meaningful to them. They would go down into the cell block and 3 more would come up, and then 3 more would come up. Well, pretty soon I had to get a couple of other volunteers from Can We Help to go visit the homeless men because I was consumed with the females. That's how it started. Now what you have is a chaplain going in to meet with female heroin addicts. Any problem with that? Yeah, well, there were a couple. Number one, I have no training as an addiction counselor. Number two, I know nothing about addiction. Number three, I never raised a daughter. I had 2 sons. And number four, I can't even communicate with these women. I'm assuming there are a lot of people in here that have raised children. When you had children that were 18, 19, 20, got themselves into a bad fix of whatever kind, got picked up for a DUI, any stuff. Did you ever have a meaningful conversation with them? What happened? Oh, nothing. Well, why'd they pick you up? I don't know. I wasn't doing anything. I couldn't even start a conversation. After about a month of trying, I was frustrated enough that I was going to call the sheriff and say, Sheriff, this lady's thing's not working out. I think there really needs to be somebody in the jail who visits with these people because they really need that connection, but it can't be me. One of my favorite ladies, Ashley, who is a survivor, I don't think I can, well, maybe I can. Ashley, come up, honey. That's Ashley. Does that look like a street heroin addict, prostitute, armed robber, young lady that did 5 years in Florida State Prison for armed robbery, for robbing a John? Does that look like one? She didn't look like that when I met her. There was a day that I didn't have time to get in to see Ashley. I had too many other people to see. I came home, it was rainy, it was cold, it was a miserable night. Sandra said to me, "You're not going back out tonight, are you?" I said, "I have to. I promised Ashley that I would see her, and one thing that you don't do is break your promises to an addict. Never, ever, under any circumstance. I have to go back." So I go back. I'd been working with Ashley to develop what was then my fledgling approach to overcoming addiction that I'll discuss with you a little more. She was reading a passage of Scripture that we had been discussing, and my mind was a million miles away. She finished reading and she looked up and she said, "Mr. Bob, where are you? What's going on?" I said, "Ashley, I'm having an argument." Ashley looks around our little 10 by 10 room and she said, "Shit, there's only 2 of us here. Who are you arguing with?" Wait just an effing minute. You're arguing with God? What's that all about? I thought you guys were on the same team. I said, "Ashley, I am absolutely positively on his team. But I'm saying to him, why do you have me here? Isn't there someplace else I can work? I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what to tell these women." Little old Ashley, who didn't look quite like she did in that picture at the time, pulled herself up as straight as an arrow in her chair, and she looked me right in the eyes and she said, "Let me tell you why you're here. You never fail us. If you tell us you'll be here, you're here. We're not used to people keeping their promises, and it means a lot when somebody does. And better yet, you don't tell us what to do. We've had plenty of people telling us what to do our whole lives. Go to rehab, go to NA, do the 12 steps, get a job. And oh, by the way, stop doing drugs." We've heard that shit for years, and it hasn't gotten us out of that mess. What the hell do they know about what we're going through and what we need, and why are they telling us what to do? But you're different. You don't try to tell us what to do. In fact, you tell us not to listen to us, to you. You tell us to go find the answer ourselves in the Bible and in prayer. You show us that with God's help we can get ourselves out of this mess. That's why you're here. Got it? Sometimes I go back down and reread those things you give us to read, and I laugh out loud just because I find the answer. You know, the fact is, most of us are trying to find God on our own, but we don't even know where the hell to look. The newspaper came and did a story on what we were doing with the homeless people in the woods and took Dale's picture. Volunteers in medicine called me a couple days later and said, "What a great article. Boy, that's wonderful, Bob. I hope it gets you some donors and volunteers. Is that man sight impaired?" So I have no idea. I'll ask him. So the next time he came to dinner, I said, "Dale, let me ask you a silly question. Do you have eye problems?" "I have eye problems? What do you think? I can't even see your face. Why do you think I live here? I don't have to cross streets." I said, "Well, the people at Volunteers in Medicine will help you. If it's cataracts or if it's correctable, they'll fix it for you." Well, after about 6 broken appointments, I gave up on Dale. We're sitting at home one night about 9 o'clock. The phone rings. "Bob, this is Dale." "Dale, where are you?" "I'm sitting in the woods. Where the hell do you think I am?" "But I finally decided I'm going to take you up on that offer." Okay. We get Dale's cataracts removed. He can see. We belong to a little golf club there in Stewart, the Stewart Yacht and Country Club, and the pro said to me one day, "God, I could really use a guy to just do errands around here, pull weeds, nothing big. I've got just the guy for you, but here's the background." Well, Dale blossomed into a $1 million man. You could see his smile from here to Route 278. Got him into a legitimate, a real-life, well-run halfway house where he was the maintenance manager and conducted the AA meetings, so he got free room and board. And he saved enough money to reconcile with his twin sisters up in West Virginia. Brought them down to Florida at his expense, showed them his new job, his new home, entertained him. You would have thought he was the king of Siam. Why did I write the book? Why am I telling you these stories? And then I'll answer any questions you have. First and most important reason is I don't want these people to be lost. I don't want their names to go unwritten and their stories untold. They're not capable of telling their own stories. I want them to have a voice. I want them to be heard. I want other people to listen to them. I want people who don't know anything about addiction or what it does to you to read Delaney's poem, because you can't read that poem without having an understanding. The person sitting in this room that can't have a positive effect on this problem in some small way. If it's only opening your eyes and understanding that these aren't just objects that lay in doorsteps or sleep in abandoned buildings. These are people. These are little girls and little boys that were born just like you and I. Somewhere their train got off the track. Help them to get back on the track. If you don't want to go into the jails, if you don't want to go into the woods like we did, I understand. You don't have to do that. Just tell your neighbor, tell your friend, tell somebody over a cup of coffee or a drink. This is a big problem. There's more to this than I thought there was.